they are still with their
Hey,
microphones muted.
Hey, Jim.
Hi.
On your camera.
Hi guys.
Hey, Thomas.
And we have Jimena also. And yeah, oh, a lot of familiar names.
Ja,
yes.
Ja, sommigen gaan het nu hebben over eventueel weer fysiek bijeenkomen. Voor masterclassdagen of dergelijke. Maar ja, de meesten die kijken toch wel naar september voordat ze projectgroepen.
Let me unmute you.
Familiar name.
Oh, you're unmuting everyone on purpose.
Denk ik ook, ja.
Be careful, we are
Ja, en dat is ook
unmuting
best wel een dilemma hoor. Want de meeste die kijken toch wel naar september voordat ze
Yeah, that was a fun moment with Walter, all excited, speaking in what sounds like Dutch.
Denk ik ook, ja.
Be careful, we are
Ja, en dat is ook best wel een dilemma hoor.
Yeah, it's Dutch, and I know what he's saying, so I don't want to hear, because maybe he's sharing secrets and I don't want to hear. So like, you're unmuted, you're unmuted. We can hear you. Hi. Hey, Thomas.
Hey, Arne. Good afternoon, everyone. Good to see you all. Some familiar faces here.
And I know what he's saying, so I don't want to hear, because maybe he's... So, as you know, for the people who are familiar with the jam, we are in the decompression zone. We are going to start at the top of the hour, but right now, you know, relax, check out where the chat is. Some of you already found, yeah, Astrid, you already found the chat. That's great. So check out where everything is and all the buttons, or, you know, you have 5 minutes to get maybe some coffee, get about a chair. Sorry, Pedro, you wanted to say something.
Yes, because I think one of us has YouTube on, and we can hear those background voices, our voices again.
Oh, that's us.
Yes.
What is
Maybe some coffee, get about a chair. Turn up YouTube, people.
That
You're
might,
here.
yes, 'cause I think one of us has. There you go. That's my voice. Oh my goodness, my voice is horrible.
Yeah, we didn't want to tell you.
Yes.
Sorry, you found out. You found out.
The worst possible way in public. So is that you, Yunyan? You need to shut. Yeah, just shut it down, the YouTube, because it's still live anyway.
Turn on YouTube. Just turn on the sound. Just the sound, not the browser. Don't. If you switch off the browser, it will leave. You won't record. Just the volume. Just the volume. So we're letting people in. Huh?
Public.
This is a chaotic start.
Yeah, so I can.
What's going on? Normally it's nice and quiet. Everyone behaves.
So I can ask a question and answer it. So here goes the question. Is my voice amazing or what? Let's wait for the question to come over.
Sorry, guys.
No, you solved it. Oh, Kitty.
Amazing.
So sorry. And then we still have to start. My God.
This was a fun.
Yunyan, this is the most chaotic start of a jam, you know, ever really. And this is this is the 10th. So just you know, it's a little celebration. This is the 10th jam. So you think we kind of got it nailed now? We got it like fixed everything, but no.
Gosh,
even after 10 times, we're still.
There are so many
It's about time we practice
lessons.
our dialogue skills. We need to learn some dialogue skills here.
Yeah.
It's mad.
Oh, Will.
Thank you, Thomas. This is, oh my Goddy. This is, I
3
feel
minutes,
forward
3 minutes
again.
before start. 3 minutes before start.
I simply feel forward again. You know, I do it every week, mainly on Wednesdays.
Someone said your voice is lovely. Mimp says your voice is
Mimp.
lovely, Pedro.
From my heart to you. Thank you.
Mim, thank you so much. Perhaps, you know, for next week, there's a vacancy in this team.
All right, 2 minutes. 2 minutes before we start. So you're still decompressing.
So I was thinking we could have used this moment to ask all these lovely people what makes them come back and what is exciting, what have they learned? But we just had a fun moment, and I think it was good also. Perhaps during the decompression zone, we might take like 5 minutes or 10 for that feedback also.
All right.
I'm just here to listen to your voice, Pedro. That's why I keep coming back.
I should just play the guitar and not say anything. It would be much better.
By the way, yeah.
I'm a terrible guitar player.
Yeah, right. So, no, you're not, Peter. And so I want to welcome everyone again. For the people we're just letting people in still. We're going to start the official program top of the hour. We're going to be, I mean, we know that at the top of the hour still people will be coming in, but we'll kind of want to start as quick as possible with the content. I want to thank everyone who's in now for being on time, because that's awesome. One of the things, one of the things we are struggling with is sort of the etiquettes, the new etiquettes we have for online meetups. Like, when do you have people actually officially come in, and when do you start? And so thank you very much for being on time. You're the on-time people, and there are some people who are still on time and getting in. Yes, I think.
And
so,
we can start.
Okay.
The last message I want to give you. So that's something we've. Another thing that we, as all of you know, or most of you know, this is our learning platform. This is our way of failing forward together with everyone and learning, and together with our community. But one of the things we want to kind of, because we don't know which view you have, so whether you are in gallery view or you are in speaker view. So be aware of that. If we have our guest Michael, we can introduce him later, but it's good to kind of make sure that sometimes you are in speaker view so you can see the person, and sometimes you are in gallery view. We'll give you a hint every now and then, but just so we want to have a little bit more control over what you're doing, but we don't. Anyway, so Yunyan, go ahead, please. At the top of the hour, welcome.
Welcome everybody. Getting control a little bit back again. I am feeling very excited. My heart is going to like boom, 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 boom because of. Anyway, first of all, Steve is back in today with us. Yeah. And Esquiel and Mark still say hello to you guys. What is this? Where did you arrive? This is the Wednesday Web Jam, and it's a platform for experiments, for design thinkers, for non-design thinkers, for designers, non-thinkers. Anyway, you are so much welcome. And here we are going to find answers for our new situation, but it's even better than that, because we are going to find better questions, leading us to better answers and leading us to get out of this situation of COVID. Yeah. For this, a certain philosophy is so much needed. Failing forward, that's our philosophy. And I just did it again for you guys. There is just no other way. So share with us your thoughts, your dreams, your tears, and your laughters. Now, the logistics. You are muted at this moment, and there are times that we want to unmute you as well. Switch on your camera. Arne just explained, would love to see you, and use the chat box, because our guest of today loves to hear your questions. So what's the agenda? Arne will introduce our guest. Our guest is going to present a little bit, make you guys work in breakout rooms. You come out of it again. We talk a little bit more, wrap up, and then at 6 o'clock, there is the backstage going to start. So that's the agenda for today. I think back to you, Arne. Help us bridge the way.
So for this jam, we've chosen. I mean, I think we've never being afraid to choose difficult topics for the jam. Just the 1 hour we actually have. But I think today we've been challenging ourselves a little more than usual. At least I feel that way, because we're going to talk about dialogues. And one thing I find very difficult in this new situation is to have a real dialogue, to create human connections, to kind of, those skills are, I think, so essential for many things. We're going to talk about that today. And we have a guest, Michael Thorley. And Michael, I've known Michael for, well, I think it's over, I don't know, it's probably like now 2 years, maybe even, that we started working together. And Michael is someone I feel is, first of all, he is a very big inspiration to me as a human being and with his knowledge, but also I always get the feeling he looks straight through you, which is probably not true, but I'm not really sure. So that kind of makes me a little bit nervous always when he talks to me, like, you know what I'm thinking, don't you? So I'm really looking forward to this session with Michael. You know what I'm thinking. I'm really looking forward with this session with Michael. Michael is going to lead you through the web jam, and I'm not going to talk anymore because you're going to be spending time with Michael and getting to know him way better than I can explain. So Michael, I think you wanted to start saying something about people and how you want them to be in the breakout rooms. And what do you think?
Hi, everyone. Hope you're well, comfortable. Some faces I love and know, and others which are new. So what is it like for you when you meet somebody for the first time? What things do you imagine? What do you look forward to? And what do you feel inside that you want to hold back to? So this afternoon is about dialogue, and it's the very beginning of dialogue. Why are we talking about dialogue? Well, essentially, we're saying that in the world, we need more kindness and more empathy. And empathy is a precondition for dialogue. And without dialogue, there can't be movement in this world. And if there's no space for movement, in my view, there can be no change. So if change starts with dialogue and dialogue starts with you, then as getting familiar with some new skills, or they might be familiar to you, is what we're going to do. So I have a request, which I notice I feel slightly nervous about asking you, but it's a really important one. During this afternoon's webinar, you are going to practice in groups of 3 what we are learning. So you are going to end up in a group of 3 people that you probably don't know. And we're going to encourage you to have a conversation, and we'll give you some structure. None of that conversation will be recorded. You're not going to be asked to give any feedback for it, but it is an essential part of the experience of speaking. So what I would ask you now is just to check in with yourself if you're feeling anxious about that. And if you are willing to stay with the anxiety and walk into those rooms, which would really welcome you to do. Or if you feel for now that is something that you do not want to do, then we would really kindly and politely ask you to make a different choice with what to do with your time now. And there's a very important logistics reason for that, is with the people who are left behind the scenes, Yun Yen is going to do some magic and just divide us into groups. So we do need to know how many numbers that is. So I hope I've been able to, with my heart, explain why it's important and to honor you with giving you a choice, but encouraging you to stay in with your difficulty if that's what it is. Okay, so brilliant. So what I'd like you to ask you to do now, I'm just going to share my screen with you, hoping the technology works. Moving various things out of the way. I want you to just sit in a way that you're very comfortable with yourself, physically comfortable, really connected to the ground, to yourself, because I'm going to ask you to consider the following. Recall a recent experience, maybe in the last week, where you had a really good conversation with someone, and either in your head or on a piece of paper, please write down or recall, what did you actually hear in that conversation? What did you actually observe? and what did you actually feel? So I'll just give you a minute or two to do that. And this is an experiment, so we are going to go quite quickly, but you'll have much more time to do this again. Now I'm going to ask you a connected but slightly different question, which is for you to think about, if my slide works, so we always have a technical, or I always have a technical problem. The question will be, when you had a not great conversation, what was it that you heard, what you actually observed, and what you felt? So again, just take a minute. When you had a not so great conversation this week, what did you actually hear, actually observe, and actually feel? Again, it's a bit of a quick exercise, but now just do a quick comparison between the two in your own mind. How were they similar in terms of what you heard, or in what way were they different? What did you observe in the really good conversation and the not so great conversation? And what you felt in the really good conversation and what you felt in the not so great conversation? And just because I'm playful, please focus on you and your feelings and your sayings, not what the other person was doing. So what we've just been doing there as a step onto the way of having a conversation is looking at the levels of listening that we do. So if you just look back at your notes, or in your mind's eye, when you talked about what you heard, do you remember the actual words that were used? Do you remember the word order? When you're noticing your observation, so I notice as I'm speaking now, I feel a bit tight in my throat. Were you hesitating? Was the repetition? Tone of voice, volume of voice, pace? And can you observe without giving it meaning? And also tap into, when you were listening or in that conversation, what was your response? And I ask you to really consider your body sensations, your feelings, your emotions, and your thinking. And just if we can use the chat very quickly, please can you just write into chat the predominant feeling you have at this minute right now. I think just have a quick look at what's coming up from us in the chat. Curiosity, anxiety, rushed. And one of the dilemmas about the rushing in this setting is, this is just an introduction. So how do we take the right space and place for conversation? So it's a really good spot. So we've been talking about the levels of listening and been asking you to think of, conversations which were good or conversations which were less good. And now I'd like us to consider how we actually apply that to what we're doing with each other. So you can see a slide in front of you, because we're talking here about high quality advocacy, so somebody who makes a play for something, and high quality inquiry. What I'd invite you to do right now is to just read to yourself the left-hand side. So as an advocate, these are the things which you would be doing. So if you take a moment to read them, notice your thoughts and feelings as well. So hopefully you've had a chance to read through those things as an advocate. On this left-hand side, just here, as an inquirer, this in general is what I find to be the lesser used skill, if I'm polite in that way. But what we are doing as an inquirer is to ask a question, but to do it in such a way that we really begin to understand the data, the thinking, and the information to what got them there. So I was having a conversation with the guys who run the web jam with us, and somebody asked a question. It was Yun Yan, just to say that. And I said, please, can you tell me what's behind your question? Because if I know where the question is coming from, I have more of a sense of how I might choose to inquire further. So the second one is state why you are asking the question. And importantly, why this might be important to you. So it's really important for me because I simply don't understand the logic of this argument. Or it's really important for me because I feel unsafe. Or it's really important for me because I love this place and I want to make sure I can do my best. Another thing to do, and this is really important, people will often make a statement about something and give one example. Really encourage them to ask for other examples. So in this case, this would be an answer. Or in this context, how would the answer be different? So again, just think about that. And this is where we talk about the beginning of dialogue and change. In any conversation for me, and hopefully for you as well, I'm looking for new understanding and for the unknown to reveal itself. So I'm trying not to destroy or self-promote. So again, if you just look at both of these sides, there's the advocacy role and the inquirer role. And as you really well know and understand already, these are mixed. But in order to practice them really tightly, we're going to invite you into an exercise, okay? So I'm going to stop sharing and introduce you to an exercise with my three friends, okay? So the point of the exercise is you're going to be put into groups of 3, where the first one, Mr. Bear, will be an advocate. So you will do everything that's under the advocate side of that slide. Mr. Polar Bear will be the inquirer, and he or she will listen. So I'll be having a good old natter like this, while my dog's cat will be listening. They will be observing, so they will not be part of that conversation. So Mr. Bear, I believe this was a really good conversation because of ABC, go down that list. Oh, why do you think that? What examples do you have? Mr. Cat listens. So you do that bit for 5 minutes. Then Mr. Cat, Miss Cat, gives observation on that conversation. So it's not a conversation, it's really listening to the feedback. When they've had a good old natter, Mr. Bear changes role and becomes the observer. The other person becomes the inquirer and the other person the advocacy. Okay. So what's going to happen now? You're going to go into your groups, and please feel free to either use my favorite characters here, or use ABC, or use a wine or something like that. And we will see you back here in 20 minutes, 21 minutes, in fact. So Yun Yan, thank you.
You're welcome, Michael. I'm going to create the breakout rooms. And let me see. I try to put you guys in 18 different rooms.
Yu Yan, we're down to 51 total. So
okay.
Fewer.
Yeah, so 16 rooms.
16, yeah. Let's do 16. So you're going to be with 3 persons. If you see 2, it's possible that you do 2 as well, or you come back to the general session and I'm going to reroute you. So I'm going to start now.
Yeah. And we have a link on the chat for you to use.
Okay. Seems to go well. Okay.
It's always such a weird moment.
Well, what I can see is there are a few rooms with 2 persons, and I have persons here in the general session, right? Mim, shall I try to move you to another room?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I can see. I think Zoom is still routing the people into rooms.
Shall we let Christina in still? She's a bit late, but we know her. So.
Okay. Arne, do you see Jim Henderson requesting for help in his breakout room? Just checking with you whether you see that.
No.
Could you? He is in room 16.
I can't move.
You can't move, so I do that later. All right. So I still have a few persons here. Yep, I see you, Mim. And I'm trying to. Because I can't see your name in the bigger list.
Hi there.
We can't hear each other.
Technical.
Hello. Hi.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Like we can't hear each other in the breakout room.
Also, so maybe silly question, but you tried unmuting, obviously, right? So
yes,
if you're unmuted, then that's weird.
Yeah, so me and Howard were in the same breakout room. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I can't hear him either.
Shall I have a button for unmute all. Shall I try that? Do?
Right, yeah.
All participants are unmuted.
Hi.
Okay. Yeah. I am going to give the people in the breakout rooms the sign to start. Otherwise, they are waiting too long. All right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I come back to this point.
Technology. That's always the thing. Yeah. So.
No worries, that happens. So that's part of the.
I know, but it's so like frustrating.
I just came off a 2-hour meeting. Some technologist was yelling at me, so.
So
like
The
I'm
first.
Silicon Valley engineer, but I'm far away from you in terms of technology.
Okay.
Like intelligence.
Excuse me, Jennifer. I need to talk to Michael and Arne. The signal that they start for the first round, I have given that to them.
Okay. How come people are disappearing? Anyway, go. Yeah, no, go. No, I mean here in this room.
I don't know really, because
Zoom just rejected you guys.
That's horrible.
Zoom was like, no.
Do you all have the same problem?
I haven't been into a breakout room.
No.
Me neither.
No.
Can I make a proposal then that we here have a dialogue about dialogue?
Huh?
Let's ignore the running.
Oh, you got the special treatment.
And we'll be here now. I don't think that really. And get your right and left right, Michael. So, as you sit here right now, recognizing you're not in a place where you want to be, what's your biggest curiosity and interest around dialogue and how we can have this conversation?
Just starting to self-introduce ourselves, I guess.
Come on.
Starting to introduce ourselves. It's like, hello, I'm Christina, I'm here, and I would like to know how it's about starting a dialogue. It's like what we are expecting of this kind of session. But I have a question because I have another friend who is waiting for in the breaking room, but we were only two. Sorry, I just disturbed. So I just come here to say hello, but in the breaking room we are 2 persons instead of being 3. So I don't know how we can manage that.
Sorry guys, I need to go to the washroom. So washroom break.
There we go.
5 minutes.
All right. So Niels, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. So in your slides, Michael, you mentioned we have an advocate and an inquirer, but usually conversations are reaction to one another. Can you maybe explore a little bit on that? Because when I took my notes for the 2 conversations, one was a great conversation and one was another conversation with my mother, so totally different feelings. But it often always try to start positive, but from reaction I get from a conversation, my mood can swing over completely. How does that work, and how can you deal with it? Or
well, I would be interested to know what other people think, but just in case the internet was interrupted when I was talking about that slide, the advocate and inquiry, it's just divided for the purposes of the exercise. Normally you are doing both, as absolutely you say. So it's just for learning. What I'm interested in is the word you're using, which is to react. Yeah. React suggests an immediate, almost automatic reaction. So if I were to say to you the word response, how is a response and a reaction different?
I would say a reaction is maybe from the gut right away, based on emotion, and a response might be controlled.
So how might we do that? How do we differentiate between a reaction and a response?
Take some time before you respond.
Yeah.
But how does it work in a conversation without falling to a awkward silence?
Some of the people on this call know me really well, so I'm just waiting for them to say something.
Oh, okay.
So this one
I'm very modest.
So I'm interested that for you, you have called it an awkward silence.
Yeah, but it's...
Well, I was going to invite Christina to talk about an experience of silence, just to put it into the room for some learning, if you'd be willing to, Christina.
Yeah, our experience. Okay. 1 year ago, I think, we had a session, but as we were placed in different locations, so we did it by internet. So we connect on WhatsApp, and we just staying looking at us without saying anything. And we had an incredible experience because we just talk without using our verbal. The communication was more non-verbal and we connect. Yeah, we connected without saying anything.
And that, I would say a bit is about empathy. So empathy for me, and we will all have our different views, and it might be interesting to hear them, is an ability with absolute humility to give up to what is here right now, including silence, which contains far more stuff than words can ever convey. So, you know, when we say, you know, the silence is awkward or it's difficult or whatever it is, often it's our belief in what others think silence means, other than what we truly experience it to be. So there's an expectation, I need to say something. Well, who says?
Yeah, so what you're saying is silence has a function within a conversation. It's not the lack of not talking. It gives you a moment to think things over, observe, understand perhaps your partner in the conversation. And beyond that.
Yeah, and to build on Christina's point, I would say it's talking without using your voice.
I agree. I was told that if somebody is saying bad things to me, just don't react and just stay silent. And that's also a way of communicating that I don't want to be part of this conversation, or I don't want to say anything more because I don't want to waste my energy. And that's the way to communicate that. Yeah. And it works in real life.
That shows you silence is powerful as well, because that somebody, you know, expects something from you and you're not giving him or her the power, right?
Exactly, yes.
I think silence is the most underused strategic form of communication we ever have. And I can't remember, somebody very clever said, our biggest choice as human beings is the moment from stimulus to response, and it's called choice. Exactly as Jennifer and Mimp, you're saying, I can choose to, so I could choose to be silent, I could choose to kind of, when I work with clients, I'm very aware of what's going on for me, so sometimes I will actively choose to say something which I know is going to disturb the system, but it's a very conscious thing. Other times I might choose to say nothing. And that's why I think, you know, that exercise about noticing your body. So as you were saying, Niels, you know, our first reactions are our gut reactions. We can't even, it's kind of, what the hell? What's going on?
Yeah.
Ilka, what are you noticing in this conversation?
My own fear to speak, because I can understand everything in English, but my speaking in English is poor. So it was a combination of listening to what you say and the fear you would ask something.
What is it like now to recognize the fear and do it anyway?
It's okay.
Why do you think I ask that question?
I'm sorry?
Why do you think I ask that question?
Because I was quiet, I don't know, because I didn't say something.
So my intention was for you to acknowledge that you can say something, even if you feel nervous. You still have a voice.
Yeah.
It sounded to me like you want Ilka to be brave.
I'd like her to be who she is, but I'm also quite pushy. You know, if Ilka were not that brave, she would have left the call. So if you remember right at the beginning, we made the invitation, quite a strong one too. If you really don't want to face into it, please leave, because we don't want to put people in a place where they feel overwhelmed. So thank you for staying.
I have a question. May I go? Hi. So my question is, how do you explore these topics within the context of culture or cultural differences? Especially if you do not know, for example, we used silence before. If you do not know that silence means a certain thing in a certain culture, how would you approach dialogue within cultural differences?
Where would you start? So I know where I would start, Salem, but where would you start, given that this is a dialogue?
Well, I have learned to ask questions and to explore even the most obvious of situations. So my approach would be to ask what silence would mean in a conversation if I were there, but I had to learn that.
And one of the skills of true dialogue is exactly that, whereby you enter into a situation with the strongest gift of all, which is not knowing. You sit there as if you have landed on a completely different planet. And you try, and it's really difficult for all of us, I think, to put everything you know about power, gender, age, height, sex, sexuality, whatever it is, to one side. So I do a lot of work in multinational teams, and the amount of misunderstanding that comes because people start doing a task before they connect is phenomenal. And they spend hours and hours trying to come to a decision when they probably haven't worked out that in some cultures, it is right that the boss actually makes the decision. In others, it's consensus. So unless you have had that conversation, you're kind of wasting your time. And again, it's all about how do you make yourself vulnerable to try and reach into the other experience. So actually, what is it like to sit here? So I did some work in Saudi Arabia. I'm an openly gay man, so you can imagine for me that was a bit of a trial. And I had the conversation in that group about how do you want me to be in this group facilitating you? And interesting, they said, we don't care. Do you have a PhD from Harvard? And I said, well, actually, no. So that was the reason.
Get out.
So it's really interesting to test what it is about yourself you are nervous and anxious of, because actually some people just don't care about what is on your mind. So that was a lesson for me. But what are your experiences? We've got huge experiences on here with us 12 people.
And about also observation, because when we are in a situation that we are feeling that we don't control anything and we don't know anything, it's just to step in and just be and observe. And then it's a way of connect with people, just observing how they are doing the things and who wants to start speaking first, or it's a way of having the zoom out perspective of the other person, you know, because I love travel. So when I came in a place that I don't know the culture or even the city, so I just observe what the others are doing to follow them, right? If it's a good path or not, because I have to integrate it with them.
It's like the saying, when in Rome, do what Romans do, right?
Sorry?
Where there's a saying where when in Rome, you do what the Romans do. So is that what you're saying? It's like you have to adjust to be like, let's say in the place, in the setting, and be like what they are doing, do what they are doing.
Yeah, be there, be present, right? And observe, because I don't know how to react, because I don't know the people, I don't know. Yeah, definitely.
I've had an experience working, when we were working for Flisco, so Niels, and I think you have very, because, you know, because of the work in Africa, that I had quite a few moments specifically with the research, trying to understand sort of people, that I felt really stupid because somehow you are pre-programmed, you have all these things in your head, and sometimes you just don't know you have them until you're confronted with them. So I especially, I won't go into the detail because it's too long a story, but I had quite a few experiences where we did some research and the outcomes were, to me, like, that's illegal, or that's not possible, you shouldn't do that way, that's not right, you know, and because in my mind was like, you shouldn't do that, that's wrong. And a friend of mine who lived in Japan for a long time, he called the Dutch uncle, but he meant that we were like pre-programmed to kind of we have the way we think things should be and the way things should supposed to be. And if you see something that is different, you say, that's not supposed. And in Japan, you don't do that. You don't go like, oh, these people, you know, they're walking the wrong way, or they're leaving their trash out at the wrong time or something. They shouldn't do that, you know, and that's something you don't do. So how do you have those kind of experiences, Niels, about how do you cope with that?
Yeah, well, from my visits in Africa, I know that really simple things are different in another culture or have different meaning in another culture. I remember when I opened the door for a female colleague over there, which afterwards, which I think is polite. You know, here in Holland, it's polite to open the door for a woman, but there it was the other way around. No, you should go first into the door in the entry, because you're the man, and it's a weakness that you don't go first. So these are so really little things, but everything has a different meaning. So when I came first to Africa, I always held back, try to be respectful, and try to observe what others do and go along with that. Because depending on your own experience from your own home, it won't do you always good. You have to, you have to observe and try to make sense out of it, I guess.
One thing I would add to that is, I don't know what kind of roles that you do, but being very clear of your role is really important before you take a particular stand in dialogue. So I am an external consultant or a facilitator. And my point of difference in the market is that I am different and I won't become part of your culture, because if I do, then I become more like you and I become less effective. But that is really contracted very tightly and clearly up front. So I would agree with absolutely everything that people are saying here. But understanding our role is critical, because we're all part of a system. And which part of the system are we trying to influence in order to get it to change and move? So I would add that to our great discussion.
Well done.
Thank you. Everybody is back in the room. Back in the room. Yeah. Welcome, everyone. Thank you. Just as a quick, that's a really quick practice. And can you just in the chat again, just write a word, any word you like about what you're thinking, what you're feeling, whatever it is.
Wil je dan deze pan onderin zetten?
Wait, who do we hear?
I think somebody needs to go
Doe
mute.
maar 35 minuten.
Yen, can you mute everyone except Mike?
I think it's Astrid.
Okay.
So that was just a very quickly top of hand. So thank you, Jenny. Based on that experience, just write one word or two words about that experience. So wonderful. So this is it's one way of learning how to have more effective conversations. And I would really encourage you to falsely use those angles and then be really brave about. So when you're in that conversation just now, just call to mind, what was the one question I thought of but didn't actually ask? That's always useful and can often tell us something not about that person, but what might also be going on the system. Actually, is this something in our organization that we never ask about? So I don't know how many people here are from England or from the UK, but we never usually ask about sex, politics, religion, or money. Well, not directly. We go around the houses because we're English and we say, where do you live? How big is your house? Is there somebody else living at home? How long have you, etc., etc. So just before we finish for now, and this is a quick introduction, I just want to say a couple of things about empathy. And empathy is something, and I'm noticing consciously now, I'm consciously changing my tone of voice, and I'm trying to get more into my body to connect to the wonderful faces I can see here. But for me, empathy is a leaning in to the experience of the other, a discovering attitude not one of diagnosing or trying to find a solution, but one in which I'm trying to find a connection in which we are both changed. Now, you will have your own definitions of that. And I am a bit of a cynic when it comes to lots of stuff that is used in management consultancy. And I am one, so I can own it. So I find empathy is being overused and slightly commoditized as a something to do rather than how to be with other people. So at this point, I would just say, connect with empathy, use these practical skills, and really stretch yourself. Go to the next conversation that you're going to go to and make it the best ever conversation, the greatest outcome you could ever want, your greatest hopes, your greatest desires. And when you think about, oh my Lord, here's a really difficult conversation, there is no such thing as a difficult conversation. It is how you yourself approach it and think of others and use your skills. So all conversations for me are like a scallop or an oyster. There's always a pearl inside. Might not be very nice, but it's always a gift for us both. So for now, thank you. And I'm going to hand back to Anna, I think. Is that right, Anna?
Well, yeah, you just did. So I must be right. Yeah, thank you so much, Michael. I do, because not everybody was obviously listening to our conversation, but I really liked what we did in the main room also about silence. That I think that if you haven't, I mean, somehow it's again like having a better conversation, dialogue. These are all words we know, and we know that silence is important. Yes, we do, but I thought it was interesting because so we had a moment actually that nobody was talking, and I felt the urge to fill the void. You feel like I want to, and right. So Niels, I see you. Yeah. It was, well, because we just talked about silence. It was a very paradoxical moment. We said, well, we just talked about silence, so I can't say anything because we just talked about silence. But the value of silence. So can maybe Mimp or Niels, can you talk about that for a bit? What happened?
Yeah, I mentioned something about an awkward silence, and then Michael explained that maybe there's no such thing as an awkward silence, but silence can be very functional and has a function within a dialogue. And then somehow we ended up saying nothing, and I felt the same thing as you, kind of feeling, oh, I had to say something. Well, I think for about 10 seconds it was silence, and somebody started asking a question, which I felt relieved because now the silence was over.
And it wasn't you. This wasn't me.
And it wasn't me. Yeah, exactly.
Someone else did it. But my question to Michael would be, why is it more scary to say nothing than to say, like, just just start talking nonsense? Why is that less scary than to be, why is it so scary to be silent? You're on mute, so you are silent. That's maybe.
Well spotted. I thought it was an experiment. It will be different for everybody. So if you think back to your early life story, so I'm one of a big family, how do you get your voice heard? How are you appreciated? Is it because of what you do or who you are? A combination of both. So on this call here, I imagine the majority of people do not have English as a first language. I would not know that, so people express ourselves in different ways. Silence for me is a way, I would say, of, if I'm really honest with you, protecting myself. I want to wait to see what is around me before then consciously choosing how to respond to it rather than react. And I think that's maybe something for us all to consider. What is it I think people think of me when I'm saying nothing, but actually being fully present here in my wholeness, in my silence? Because at the end of the day, that is all we are. Bit of a philosophy, and you may find that, you know, you will have your own way of looking at it. But in any conversation, just be curious, what is the meaning of silence here?
So, and here again, I'm thinking, oh, we should be silent, but because of time, I won't, because I have more questions around this, because it is such a, because the way we communicate is, you know, we usually, you know, by having conversations and by, you know, talking to each other. Now we are, you know, stuck in these windows, in these little boxes. And so things like body language are very minimalized, and it's very difficult to kind of see and feel the energy in the room. How does it, so maybe Michael, also now after you know, we've done this here, what is your feeling about, you know, having a dialogue about dialogue when we're all kind of scattered around the world and all in these little boxes? Because I feel that it's such a challenge.
Sorry, was there a question there? If there was, I didn't hear it.
Yeah, so I wanted to know how you felt about that. So now, after doing this this session, at the end of this session, and having to kind of have a conversation or dialogue about dialogue, where I feel that it's such a challenge to do so when we're all stuck in this Zoom little windows and boxes. Where does how do you feel about that?
One of the things I notice about the time period is I prefer time at the beginning to connect more deeply than we did. So I think I framed that this would be a rush, and it would be, you know, quite a long time to connect with people and somebody in the main group. I think Christina wanted to know other people's names and so on. And I think somebody also said at the beginning, we were rushed. So I would take more time. And I don't know about you guys, but what I found is people have been more personally revealing in a situation like this than perhaps they would be face to face. So I'm really curious about that. Maybe because we want to make the connection, so we are more willing perhaps to be more of ourselves. I don't know. You will all have your own views and decide how you do that. But I do like that idea if I generally will try and reach into somebody's experience.
Does anyone want to share something that happened, something that you felt? You can just unmute yourself and
I was just typing in the chat that regarding Michael said about maybe you're more revealing this way. I work in digital healthcare, and especially the human side of it. And it's something that's very common, that often by digital and anonymous digital healthcare, people will talk about their deepest problems and secrets in 5 minutes of time, compared to face-to-face help, where people need well, a minimum of 3 hours talking before they feel confident enough to share their secrets and their real problems. And I think it's very fascinating that sometimes the face-to-face aspect is a real burden to come to the real conversation.
But is that because people are overwhelmed when they're in a doctor's office or with a professional? Do you know that? Because
yeah, we've interviewed people, and often I should say often with people who have problems of which they are ashamed. Those people say, if I have to pay attention to how you look at me, what you find of what I'm saying, then I'm distracted of telling you what it's really about. And they find it much easier to not see you, so they can be close to their own story and their self. And when the confidence is there in a later stadium, people choose to come together face to face because the connection is there. So it's also not really escape, but it's more about if the connection is there to be made, if that's still needed. Anonymously can work better for some people than face to face.
Interesting.
Anyone else?
I think we need to take into account also our mood and the state of being we are before the meeting and also during the meeting, and also the way we resonate with the other person or with the topic, with the subject we have. And I think it also relates to our openness to the degree of our openness to a dialogue, and also, as Michael said, to the empathy, to the way we empathize with the other person or the respective situation which we talked about. I think there are many things there are many issues we need to factors we need to put in the same equation, but and a lot of them are related to our human being things, emotions and feelings. It's more, I related them more to the feelings and also to the self-confidence and self-trust rather than skill. Yes.
Thank you. Just to, because of time, we are actually at the end of the official program. Now, for people who haven't been at the Jam before, you might not know, but we are going to be in backstage for 30 minutes. So if you have to leave because it is top of the hour and it's the end of the official program. So I want to thank you so much for joining in, and I want to thank Michael for his an amazing story and his presence. And thank you for joining us. We will be in backstage here, hanging with you if you want to stay and chatting about what happened and reflecting a little bit, or any questions you want to kind of ask Michael or continue the conversation. Be welcome to stay with us for another 30 minutes, but also feel free to leave. And this was sort of our 10th Wednesday Web Jam. So and I think it was a very good topic for this, because basically I think dialogue is something that we have been struggling with, and we're learning, and it's a skill we all need. So anyway, thank you so much. So yeah, we're in backstage now. So welcome to the backstage, people.
Welcome everybody. I'm going to sit.
Like,
yes, Arne.
Actually, I felt it was less. No, actually, no. This time I felt less stressed than lots of other times. Lots of other times I was more like, no, but I was more like, it was more like a train. I was more like, and I was more like, I felt more at ease, and yeah. So it was a comfortable. It's just an hour, but it goes by really quick. That's almost another story. So anyway, Michael, how did it go?
think we should sit in silence for 30 minutes and just
Right.
let it absorb.
You can do that. You can do that.
How was it? I'd be very interested to hear how it was from the participants, because this was an experiment. Why is that important to me? I think I speak quite clearly, but I'm aware that English is not the first language. And I have a bit of a anxiety when I speak to so many people about something I'm passionate about. And if I were to hear that, what would be different would be to enable me to focus on what to do more of, to do less of, if we were to run this again, and how we could work together to run it for even more people. So I would find that helpful. And I hope I've used inquiry and advocacy in that.
Yeah. So, anyone?
Yeah, I can share with you what happened to us. I have been with Shiana. She's also there. I can see her. But we were only 2 persons. So at the beginning, we were actually puzzling how we get a 3rd person. So I wrote something in the chat. Nobody answered. Then I asked for help, because there's a help thing, but nobody answered at all. So we thought, okay, we solved the problem ourselves. So first we started to speak, and then came somebody, I mean, today we are 3 here in the place where I am. So one of my colleagues came in and I said, can you be the observer? So she gave us a feedback, because we had that sensation that this is an exercise and we want to do the experience well. We could have said, okay, we don't need an observer, we just speak and have our dialogue, why not? But it's funny that when you are in this artificial situation, you want to do the exercise. And so did the exercise. If well or not, that's another question. Yeah, and I think we felt both comfortable. I mean, Shiana can say so, and it was very personal, actually. I shared with her a personal experience with one of my daughters, and she shared professional experience or experience about dialogue, but actually her experience was also very personal. So, because when you speak about your feelings, either in your private life, either in professional life, it is always personal. So I agree what was said before, that when we are in these artificial situations, in this screen, we don't know the person, perhaps we never will see again, because Shiana never has participated in these jams. So you can speak about things because you think that person never will, I mean,
We'll never see them again.
I don't know.
But I do think that the breakout rooms, they have an intimacy that favors conversation. And I think that's interesting. I was never expecting, because I've been in other sessions like that, and I do feel it triggers conversation right away. I thought that your introduction, I really liked it. It was very to the point. So for me, that gave me a very clear message. Where I was a little bit, we were talking about like the 3 roles of the, so I was with Jimena, and we were talking, so we took a little bit, it was also the 2 of us, to get clear what we were going to do. But I said, I think it was actually a really nice exercise to do in a very big group, because it is by doing this that you're actually able to have meaningful conversations afterwards as well. Because if you talk too much about this, I think you lose the point. I think now it will stay with me much more than if you would have talked for, let's say, 30, 40 minutes, and then we have done a very short exercise. But I really like your introduction. It was very clear, calm, and to the point, and yeah, about the powerful, I would say, the power of a proper dialogue and what it will bring.
I would like also to join Arnold. I'm pronouncing right your name. As a non-mother tongue English speaker, I found your the way you approach it as very good. I mean, the tone of voice was calm. We were able to understand what was the point. It was inspiring, and I found particularly interesting this table you have presented, with the one with the two different roles of the advocate and the inquirer. I think I will going to do a small printout and bring it always with me, just to remember what are the important things that I should pay attention to in conversations. Yes, we were also expecting to have 3 persons in the room. We were only 2, but we decided to improvise as well. And so we had the role of the observer also on top of the role of the inquirer and the advocate. It was a bit tricky because sometimes it's difficult to just judge yourself when you are doing something, but it was possible and it worked also pretty good. Especially if you combine the role of the observer with the inquirer. Probably just because I do qualitative user experience, user research, sometimes. So you always need to ask a question and observe for understanding what the other person says. Probably a bit more used to this kind of situation, but definitely it worked. So thanks a lot for this inspiring session.
Jenny, you were asking for help.
Me? Am I asking for help?
You wanted to interrupt.
Did I?
Weren't you? I think I read, so I misunderstood your chat message. Like, help me, I want to interrupt.
Oh, I'm confused. No, I was just playing around with this idea of silence. And yeah, our speaker, Michael, was asking what could he do better with another session. So I think I wrote in there, my personal challenge is to interrupt. That's my personal challenge, but it doesn't mean to say I wanted to interrupt now.
I know. I thought it would just help you. I mean, I thought it was a cry for help. Let me interrupt.
Oh, no. I know how to cry for help.
So in the spirit of inquiry, Jenny, but the question, you gave the question, but I believe it also comes from more than one person. That's normally the case. What do we think about the word interrupt? Do we have a value about it? So you know, in England 50 years ago, it's rude to interrupt people. Well, maybe it is, but what is the purpose of the interruption? So if we are in an organizational setting and we own our primary loyalty to the organization because it is paying us, then maybe we reframe what interruption is. Maybe we're saying it's a pause, and you need to find your own language. So I don't have any problem interrupting people, funnily enough, but I notice I have a way of doing it. So I always use my body, and I always ask, do you mind if I interrupt? But I'm actually not asking for permission at all, because by doing it, I have done it.
I'll practice that one.
But find your own way, and often it is in your body. So one thing which I think is difficult online is we don't have that physical range of movement. So if we're facilitating in a room, we can physically move and stand forward or sit down, and we don't have to say anything. But here, how do we do it? It might be if I'm hosting, I just turn everybody's cameras off. That would be a shock. You know, so I think that's learning for all of us. How do we do it? And back to that cultural question, you know, what does an interruption mean in this particular cultural setting? And I'm not a big fan of spending hours doing ground rules, not particularly, but in some cases it might be necessary to ask that question. You know, if I have something to say, I don't want to appear to be rude, how can we agree when we want to say something?
Michael, can I ask a more generic question? You say there, but I will. You say there are no difficult conversations, but in the end we do face difficult conversations. So what makes them difficult? Why do we have difficult conversations? I mean, you would expect that after a while, you know, humans would be able to really interact in an easier way, and that we would, you know, get into the hang of it, of talking to each other.
Well, I'm just looking at the faces here, and I can see some people that I know, one of whom is Andrea Zirnstein, who I know quite well, and I know Sienna, and I know Christina, and they know exactly what I'm going to ask you, which is, please, could you put that question into the I and answer it for yourself? And that is a question for us all. So what is the kind of conversation that I perceive as being difficult?
Mm-hmm.
Because quite often we think something is going to be difficult based on expectation of something, based on old data. So if we get practical about it, and this is going slightly out of a tangent, my belief is that the only thing you can change is the here and now.
Yeah.
So even if you are thinking about yesterday, you are doing that in the here and now. If you are thinking about tomorrow, you are doing it in the here and now. If you are worried about what you or we have labeled as a difficult conversation, how is that useful to you? So I think whatever we do, however bizarre it looks, is serving something useful.
Yeah.
So I might say, well, I think this is going to be a difficult conversation because I don't want to admit to my part in it. That is often the reason, but I'm not saying that's true for everybody.
Oh, of course, yeah. But it's good to kind of like recognize and understand how do we go about finding why we feel it will be a difficult conversation. Yeah. So it's basically asking ourselves, let's have an honest inner conversation and decide why am I feeling this? Why am I struggling to go into this conversation?
Yeah, and it's really useful. So I've just seen the comment from MIMP. So I have an experience in my childhood where I was brought up in an institution where the head of this institution, it was a children's home, was a 60-year-old man who would always wear suits and be very authoritarian. Even to this day, 50 years later, when I see a man with status in a suit, I have an internal, where's Hans, reaction. And I need to catch it and honor it for what it was back there and ask myself, why is that useful here? Well, actually, it's useful because it makes me take note and to pause and to really consider and collect myself rather than just going in and kind of going, oh my word, it's terrible, it's terrible. So I would really honor every single experience has a deeper meaning, but it's actually not that deep. If we really look, you think, God, here I go again, kind of thing. Jimena. Anna, are you moderating?
No.
Jimena is speaking.
But we see Jimena with her hand.
Yeah, but you're muted. You're muted. So, yeah.
Okay. So thank you. Now I could change it. Good. Hi, Michael. Thank you. I have a question about that part that you mentioned on, well, we were discussing on interruption about, I don't know, when it comes to women, I don't know if people read the book on Lean In, that sometimes, you know, like women should be like, you know, like keeping on like there's certain distance from conversations, or that they just shouldn't jump in. So is this something that it's important to bring into light, or is it just like culture, or how is it? Like,
I can't remember who said it, but I would never walk in, well, never, I'm not perfect by any means. I would not walk into any situation holding on to any form of stereotype. I might want to be aware that they're around, but because I mainly work in organizations, I'm very interested in how conversations and decisions get made. How do people take their place? So, you know, the worst kind of group of people I've ever worked with are men. in one group. If you ask a woman, by and large, they will say the worst group you could ever work in as a woman is an entire female group, because something goes on. Yeah. Well, I can't possibly judge that, because no, when I've been in a group of all women, I'm a man and vice versa. But it's to be really curious about what is going on here and what is my contribution to it. So somebody was asking a question. So I said, I don't aim in any way to succumb to the culture, because that isn't my role. And how can you stay out of it? By respectively naming it and saying, if it's true, it isn't helpful for me to join this particular way of being. And I'll give you an example. I went to work for the Ministry of Defence in the United Kingdom. So it's everything to do with the defence of the United Kingdom. And I was invited to be the facilitator of the main board of that group by an ex-client of mine. So I walked in and I thought I'd better wear a suit, a shirt and a tie. And I've never worn any of that stuff for years. So I was sitting in this meeting and the main client came in and he looked at me and he pointed to me. He said, Thorley, he knows me very well, go home and get changed. I'm not paying you to be part of this system. And he is a particularly sophisticated change leader, but it was absolutely right. Particularly in something, it's a very autocratic, male-dominated political environment. So my job is to be different in order to support conditions for a different dialogue and a different conversation. But you will have your own ways of being. And you don't have to do everything the client asks you. That's where you make your choice and say, actually, I choose not to.
What would happen if you had to be both? If you were in a situation that you are the one having the dialogues, like the different, but in the system? Is that like possible to have these two roles?
It's possible, but I think it is very, very difficult. Particularly if you are within a line hierarchy, you need money to pay, for the mortgage and the kids. You have to recognize that in an organization, there is a price for belonging to it, as much as there is a price for leaving. So actually working out, so we'll probably do a session on what are called organizing forces, these invisible things which are going on in the organization, which talk about how do we take our place. So I know a friend of mine, he hates his job. He's been there for 15 years, but he is willing to pay that price because it gives him lots of other things outside. No one answer for anybody, but a lot of people in employment do end up having to pay some form of price for it because they get something on the other side.
I would like to share with you a sentence about the dialogue, because I think it was touched here in several moments, is if you go into a dialogue, you admit that the other side, the other person can be right. So the dialogue is also a kind of act of generosity, because of course we are in our mind, and I mean we feel like the center of the world, each of us, and it's so difficult, as you said, to be really empathic. So in the moment you are open for a dialogue, you admit that the other person can be right. And I just had an experience which actually showed me that. I wrote a book together with a colleague friend. I'm from a design background, she's from philosophy, and we wrote about creative thinking. But the book is written as a dialogue, and we really did it like a dialogue. So I wrote something, sent it to her. Actually, we had, at the beginning we sent, then we had a Google Doc and rewrote. So all what we spoke about came there, but in a written way. So the silence, for example, there was very negative, because I wrote something and I wanted to write something more, but she didn't wrote her part, her answer. So there were 5 days of silence. So I got nervous because I wanted to put out what I researched or what I wanted to say. So I sent a message, Angelica, it's your part. And then, okay, but at the moment I can't. Then she wrote, and she had a lot of time and she wanted to write a lot of things. So in the dialogue, she wanted to tell a lot of things, but I wasn't not able. So there were some fantastic moments, but some really stressful moments, which I think also is true in a spoken dialogue. So that was a really interesting experience, and the result I think is very nice. And there are also illustrations, etc. But that's another thematic. But what do you think about a spoken or the difference between a spoken and a written dialogue? Do you have some experience there, Michael?
Could I just go back to something you've said, which I need to respond to? And just for everybody else, I hope I was clear at the beginning that today is about high quality advocacy inquiry as part of conversation, which is a step towards dialogue. So what we have been doing is having a form of conversation. Dialogue is something different. So we plan to do something on dialogue. And just to pick up some of the words you said, Katja, I'm not being critical, I'm just noticing.
Oh, but be critical.
When you know it's not dialogue is when you hear the words like right and wrong.
Wrong.
So when you hear the word right or wrong, that suggests it isn't dialogue. It suggests it's about position, which can be about conversation or debate. But dialogue automatically, in its essence, if we're really taking it to the highest level, is regenerative. Something comes from what is not yet known.
Yeah, I agree with it.
So I absolutely agree with you in that sentiment of, if I were having a disagreement with you, Katja, and I can see a friend of mine, Victoria, is on the thing here, I would probably never say to somebody, you're right. Because it also means by definition that I'm wrong. For me, that might be true. So I might use some of these dialogue skills and say, I'm really getting a sense of how that is important to you and I'm beginning to sense it. Can you say a bit more for me so I can really begin to get alongside you or not?
Yes. Yeah, we did this in the book because what happens then is that we both had a different perspective on the definition of creative, and then we wrote our different opinions, but we said, I can live with your perspective and we are here also to learn together. And that was really interesting, that by the process of writing the book, we both learned from the perspective from the other. So that for me is also very essential in a dialogue, that you construct something together with the other person.
Yes, the co-creation is one of the elements. It's critical.
Yeah.
We have 3 minutes left in the in our backstage, and again, as always, I always enjoy these moments the most because I don't know, because I like these kind of open, these flowing conversations. So maybe I would have one question. It would sort of came to mind also listening to you, Katja, and some other people. Because also in that question around silence, there's sort of there's tension and there's maybe conflict. When you have a good conversation or dialogue, is that always without conflict? Can you have conflict? I mean, because it's different opinions. I mean, is it always supposed to be a smooth and happy and nice conversation where you share everything and you're very generous, or is it also, can it also be, can you also have a positive feeling about having some kind of, I don't know, I don't know the right word for the positive conflict. I'm not sure what that means.
positive discussion.
Well, yeah, but I mean, yeah, right. Well, or are we always afraid? Because, you know, if we are, you know, I think most of us are in design processes and creating sort of safe spaces. And often I feel that what we're missing is some kind of tension, because if you don't have any tension, you don't grow. If you don't, so if you, because it's, to me, part of it is to create the safe space also to disagree, to kind of have, I know maybe, you know, have discussion, but is that something that you, because I don't think you can avoid it, but how does that kind of relate to dialogue? Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think one thing that probably we should not get for granted is that design safe environments are only for fun things and exciting things and positive things. Sometimes you also have to have a safe room in order to have, how can I say this, proper conflicts or natural conflicts or just human conflicts.
Conversation.
Yeah. Conversations where basically what is the most important is the view that we have about something or some subject or decision, is not what that opinion makes of us as a person. And I believe that's the main difference. It's the conflicts are not because of the theme of the subject, are about what those themes and subjects and their opinions and the opinions of others make us, or ours, makes us feel. So if we are safe, and if I, for example, accept that you, for some kind of topic, you overreact or get a little more sensitive, and for others you don't give a damn, but for me are sensitive, and if we are agree with that, it means that I respect your way of being, but we also have a common ground in order to choose our decisions or to talk about the different views that we have for some kind of product or subject or whatever. So I think it is also a safe space to people to have conflicts and establish some, not some rules, but some basic principles of common sense and respect in order to interact like that.
I think I said something at the very beginning which may or may not be true for you. So for every conversation or dialogue, there needs to be a shared clarity of intention and purpose. So you might try, you know, if you're in an ideation phase, you might actually say, actually in this culture, what we notice is X, Y, and Z. Therefore, our intention is to unearth or uncover these repeating patterns. And a way of doing that is not to talk about it, but to do it in a different way. So I might say to my client, let's cut the bullshit about talking about it. Let's agree this is how we're going to do it, and almost time box it. So you are, as you're saying, creating space, but always with the connection to the intention. Otherwise, it can be self-indulgent, thoughtless, cruel, unkind. And the skill of the facilitator and you and what you're doing is to enable things to go far enough where you've got a revealing or a revelation, and at that point to catch it and harness it. Then to go back to the process and say, okay, so we found something new. How have we done it so we get the learning in? Because I think you're right. If you generate a climate in which people can have a go at each other, or, oh, and another thing I've been meaning to tell you, then you have to say, well, hang on, how is that connected to the intention here? Because if you want to have a go at me, let's do that in the bar or wherever.
And with this note, we need to unmute and give a round of applause to Michael. Thank you very much.
Let's meet in the bar, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jen, thank
Bye.
you, Peter. Thank you, Steve.
Happy 10th anniversary. No.
Bye. Bye.
And see you people next
Bye-bye.
week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See you next week.
Yes. Thank you. Bye-bye. And bye-bye. Bye-bye. So we are going to go into the backstage of the backstage, and we're going to just to kind of, if you want, just to kind of have a little bit of a chat about how things were and how it went. I'll send the link for it.
Yes. Bye for now.
Adios.
Adios.
Guten Abend.